right, so hello FFA members and welcome to another FFA exclusive interview. And today our guest brings in a wealth of experience and expertise in the risk management industry to the table. And we're eager to dive into insightful discussions on navigating the ever-evolving landscape of financial risk. We're thrilled to introduce our guest, who is the head of risk management at People's Credit Union. Join us for an exclusive interview with Erin Lewis. Hi, Erin. How are you today?
Hi, Rose. Thank you for the introduction. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited. Thank you so much. I know you are very busy, so let's dive right into it. So, we'll start off with very generic questions, and then, we're curious about, what you do for credit union and such. So, we'll
Hmm.
start simple and we'll kind of dive right in. Okay, so
Okay.
first, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into risk management.
Yeah, that's a great one to start. It's actually pretty interesting. I graduated from college and I was like, hey, I don't really know what I want to do. I took a job as a teller just to fill some time. And then I kind of just landed where I am. It's so funny. And I feel like a lot of the fraud fighters I work with also started on the teller line. So humble beginnings. And then once I left a branch, I went into AML and I was an AML analyst, then a BSA officer. And then I did leave financial institutions for almost 7 years. I worked in a fintech, so implementing fraud and AML software. So I did work on the tech side as well. And then 2.5 years ago now, I came back to People's Credit Union, which is a local community credit union here in Rhode Island. And that's where I've been ever since.
That's awesome. Actually, I'm a member with credit union, so I love credit union. So far, everything has
They're
been safe with my
awesome.
info. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you've been in this industry for 17 years. Can you share some of the biggest
Mhm.
changes you've seen over your career, and do you think we are in a better place today?
That's an interesting question. So I think the largest change that I have seen is really the rapid move to online services and digital payments. So when you think about COVID and how that really rushed things along, we had people adopt digital payments who would not normally have used them prior because they like to go into the branch. So, especially at a small community credit union, we just had this huge migration of a sector of members that always went into the branch for everything, and now they're doing everything online. And so that's been really interesting to navigate because it also accelerated fraud, as we all know. And so that was a huge change. And I think it has been one of the more challenging ones that we're all dealing with.
Looking into the future, is there any type of fraud or trend that you feel especially concerned with?
Yes. And I would say a lot of the SIM card stuff that's happening now really, really scares me because 2 years ago we were pushing everyone towards multi-factor authentication. And it's like, oh, you're going to get a text on your phone and it's so safe. And now people's phones are getting hijacked and it's actually not that safe anymore. So it just feels like every time a control is created to try to outsmart these people, they really find a way around it. I mean, kudos to them, honestly. I don't know like how they figure some of these things out, but every single thing the industry comes up with, they always find a way. And so now we'll be moving towards authenticators, right? Because now we know those are the next wave and they're safer than multi-factor authentication, but that really concerns me. And then also just deep fakes and AI and all of these things. It's just like, I'm not sure that anyone is truly aware of what these things are capable yet. And I know there's so much good that we can do with them. But my concern is also like the other side of that, right? Like they're also being leveraged for nefarious means. And how far can that go? I mean, we've seen some pretty insane stuff already, and it's just in its infancy stages, AI. So, it'll be interesting to see where that goes and what we as an industry come up with to combat that.
Yes, I totally agree with you. It is concerning. Sometimes, when I get these authentications or notices and alerts, and it would ask me to kind of do something, I kind of like second guess myself. Is this like
Right.
legit or authentic? Or like, do I need to make extra calls just to make sure? So it's interesting, but I know that, everyone is fighting this and, yeah, I'd love to see where it's gonna take us in the next year or so. So yeah, I agree
Mm-hmm.
with you on that concern. Okay, so
It's
what,
scary.
yeah, it is totally. What would you say the biggest challenge is when it comes to fraud prevention, specifically for a credit union?
So we joke about this sometimes, but I actually believe this to be true. I think the greatest fraud risk to a small community organization is people. And I don't mean scammers, I just mean individuals who are our members. And sometimes I feel like we do a lot to educate them and get the word out, but we're battling against really this society of human beings, and some people are lonely. And when you meet people online, and you have that kind of hole in your life and you're really just looking for companionship, you tend to be easier to take advantage of, which is so unfortunate. So I just really think like there's a human element to all of this, and we can't control people, right? Like we can make controls at the credit union and we can do everything that we can do to keep you safe, but once you're out in the world, who you meet online and who you're talking to and whether or not they're a fraudster, that is not something we can control. So I really think the human element is just such a huge challenge to us right now. I do think that the benefit of being a small credit union is that we really know our members, right? So, like, we don't call them customers, we call them members because they're members of the community here. And so it does give us a better opportunity to have those conversations and provide, I would say, more one on one education, even. Like, we can take a lot of time to invest in the membership, but still at the end of the day, that's a tough thing to control what you're doing, like on your phone or on your laptop outside of here.
So I totally understand how human interaction comes into play, and it's pretty much out of everyone's control when it comes to, banking and all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we should just be really good about our partners. Safety also
Mm-hmm.
does not just exist with online banking. It should also go through our personal lives and all, right? So
Mm-hmm. Absolutely
yeah.
right, Rose. It's really internet safety is internet safety, whether it's your online banking, keeping your email safe, keeping your password safe. I mean, if you get into a relationship online, those same, identity protection and security protocols really do apply. And I don't think people are actually doing that. They're just like, oh, this is a human being that I met online, but it might not be, right? So
Right.
it's really taking what, like, exactly as you just said, that was such an excellent point. Taking, the protection that we use and the risk averse attitude that we use with online banking, where we want everything protected, and applying that to like dating websites. I mean, people really need to. So it's a good point.
Yes, because it is a partner for life. So you want to feel safe, right? So
Right.
yeah, right. Okay. All right. Next question is, what is the top tip or, top three at least that you could share with someone who is just getting into the field?
So I would say the top three. So if you're just starting out as a fraud analyst, I think the first thing that has helped me greatly is to understand your emotional IQ and to learn to be empathetic. Because, especially in a small community credit union, like just trying to understand people, understand how they got into the situation, understand how they're feeling, that can actually help you in your investigations. And so I have noticed that the better I've gotten with my emotional IQ and being empathetic, the more people are willing to tell me, and the more I'm actually able to help them out of a tough situation. So I think in this industry where we rely so heavily on data and hard facts, there's not typically a ton of emotion involved, but I do think having that empathy and developing an emotional IQ does help you be more relatable to the people that you're investigating. And the more information you have and the more they trust you, the more they'll tell you. So then you can help them more. So I think that is really important. The second thing is education. And I don't mean like college education. I mean getting out there on LinkedIn, connecting with people like Rose, connecting with the FFA, connecting with different industry groups. That is so helpful because the one thing that I think scammers tend to do that I probably more larger financial institutions, but really the FI industry as a whole is share information. Those scammers are on WhatsApp. I mean, they are just telling everyone, like each other, what works, like they're getting the word out there. And I think we as an industry really should be better at that. And I think we're moving towards that direction. But I love sharing information. So I learned so much from my peers. I learned so much from groups like the Fraud Fighters Alliance. There's so much information out there. So just go out there and get it. Go network, make sure you can learn as much as you can. And then I think the third thing would be develop an investigative style that really works for you, because the facts are always going to be facts and there's always going to be procedures you have to follow and different steps you have to take. But I think it's about developing that inquisitiveness and understanding where you need to ask questions and where you don't. I think those are really all probably really important things, but I would say the empathy is like the most important, because a lot of time, like if you look at the industry, the fraud losses that are reported are most likely dramatically underreported because people are scared to come forward. So the only way that we're going to get a solid line on exactly what's being lost and exactly what's happening is if we as a group are empathetic and helpful to people. And then they'll be more likely to tell us, and then we'll know what's going on.
That's awesome, Erin. I love your top three advices and tips. I totally agree, and I hope that our FFA members are learning and you know uh tips from Erin. If you have questions, let us know, we'll get it to Erin, or you can always like ask her about it as well. But I love it, Erin. In sharing information, empathy, developing, like, being an investigator type. So I guess it's like just being curious all the time, right? Not just like,
Mhm.
following steps 1 to 10. Question your steps 1 to 10, and I love it. Thanks, Erin.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into the credit union stuff, or topic, sorry.
Okay.
All right. So how does fraud differ at a credit union versus a traditional bank? Like, are there any obvious pros or cons when it comes to the type of fraud you see or how fraud cases are approached?
So I would say the pro of being at a smaller community organization is that we really know our members. So I think that is incredibly helpful. I think another pro is we are not siloed at all. We all work together towards one goal. So I constantly am in meetings with senior leadership or different department heads. I mean, we really all work together. I think in a larger organization where you have 10 different teams working towards one goal and you don't have, like our CEO is super involved, I can go to him for anything. So I think that type of access gives me the ability to affect change when I need to in a very timely manner. So I'm not going through 30 people to get an approval to change a control that could save us money or help our members. I mean, it's really a walk up the hallway, right? So I think that is super helpful. I think there is a common misconception in the industry that credit unions really don't have as much fraud. So, just to give you some context, in 2022, we prevented $970,000 in fraudulent transactions through all channels. So, that would be mobile deposits we stopped, fraudulent checks we stopped, fraudulent ACH, everything encompassing. And then last year it was 1.1 million. So if you think of like a small credit union in Rhode Island, that's actually big dollars. And so our loss budgets are obviously much smaller than a huge national federally chartered bank, right? Much, much smaller, but it's still significant to us. So we still see the pig butchering and all different versions of romance scams. We still see tons of check fraud. We still have our members' mail getting stolen. So everything that is afflicting these huge financial institutions is really affecting us too. I just think I have a lot more control than some fraud professionals because we're able to be agile as an organization because of our size. So I feel very lucky about that. And I do think it's a huge positive.
Credit unions, so are they're usually known to offer more favorable rates and more
Mm-hmm.
flexibility with lending, and this typically translates into taking on a bit more risk. How do you manage the increased risk while balancing the needs of the organization to compete and grow?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Credit unions are known for our wonderful rates, which is awesome. So it does bring us more business, and we do have a fairly large lending portfolio. And I think a big thing that we have to mitigate that risk would be a credit committee. So, in a small organization such as People's Credit Union, we have different committees that are made up of all of senior leadership. And at these committee meetings, we're going through our controls, we're going through and looking at our credit risk. We're looking at our portfolio. We're looking at what kind of paper we're holding. We typically have mostly A and B paper, which means that we have very low credit risk. So that helps. And then also just working with different third parties, such as Experian, having products from them, that helps us in our underwriting, where we're able to really mitigate most of the risk upfront before onboarding a new lending member. And so I think with all of the steps that we have in place, it's really allowed us to maintain a pretty low risk portfolio. So that's been great because then we can offer those great rates to everyone.
Yes, thank you for offering those incredible rates. Okay, the digital transition of banking services is playing a very impactful role in both fraud cases and fraud prevention. On the one hand, fraudsters can easily operate from the shadows, and on the other hand, we have more information available about like everyone than ever before. What are your thoughts
Mhm.
on the increasing popularity of endless virtual banking services? Like, are we evolving at a pace we won't be able to keep up with as far as managing risk go?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, I think. That's a great question. Like we were
No
talking about
pressure.
earlier, I mean, yeah, I know, right? I mean, yeah, I wish I could solve for that. I don't know that any of us single-handedly can, but yeah, I mean, the growth just exploded during COVID. And now we're going towards new payment rails, right? We're looking at real-time payments through different services, and it's just going to keep progressing so quickly. I do think that the fraud community as a whole has done an excellent job trying to get in front of these things, but it is evolving super fast. So I think it's really going to take a lot of teamwork. Definitely here at People's Credit Union, we have to really all be on the same page. we're looking at, so we accept real-time payments now, but we're looking at originating them. And then every time we do something like that, it's a super risk-based approach because, like you said, with all of these digital payments, we're in a digital world, there's an enhanced level of risk. But I think it's so funny because I think of when I started 17 years ago in this industry, and it was always fraudulent checks. And then they went away for a while, and now check washing is huge. So it's just funny how things are really cyclical in this industry. So even though we're so digital, you would never think that in the digital age that check washing would be something that we face. It's like it's paper checks. This was the fraud 17 years ago, and here we are, and now that's what we're battling against again. So that's super interesting to me because for all of the adoption that we've done as a society, people are still scamming us on paper checks. Who would have thought, right?
I would say fraud fighters are doing such a great job, like trying to be one step ahead. Even so, every
Mm-hmm.
time the fraudster makes one step um ahead of you guys are scrambling and doing your best, and you probably take two more steps ahead, right? So it's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
a really interesting race. And
It
so yeah.
is.
Again, it's interesting to see where it goes 10 years from now, who's gonna win the race, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Right.
so we always like to say here at FFA that together we are stronger. That's why communities and groups are some of the best ways to
Mm-hmm.
share knowledge and experiences. Is there something you see at credit union? Do you or credit unions, do you often collaborate with other credit unions or have channels to communicate with each other, assuming that many of the use cases are similar? And I know you mentioned a few. I just wanted to kind of zone in on the topic. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's an awesome question. So I'm not sure if other regions do this, but in the New England region, we do a lot of their like round tables. So actually 2 weeks ago, I just hosted one and we had a bunch of people come to the credit union, to the Middletown office, and essentially we get together and we talk about hot topics, we talk about controls, we talk about any issues anyone's experiencing. And if you are a smaller credit union in a specific region, I can guarantee you that many of the credit unions around you are probably using the same core processor that you do. And so we have a whole user group of all of the credit unions that, and even banks too, it's credit unions and banks that are within New England who use the same core processor. And we get together and we talk about different controls that are available within the systems that we use. We talk about investigations. We talk about so many things, and the agenda often changes, but I feel like I've said this a couple times in the interview. I don't want to be repetitive, but information sharing is key, and it's what the scammers are doing, and it's what we as an industry have to do. So I love your question. I think the user groups have really helped us. I think if you have a risk committee that governs your credit union's risk channels, that's super helpful. I'll have speakers come to those meetings to educate our members. That's great. And then I'm always like, I have contacts like all over the place, right? So I'm always, happy to share different controls. How are we handling something from a procedural perspective? Like, I think that kind of information sharing is so important.
All right. So when you aren't too busy saving the company from more fraud losses, what are some of the things you like to do? Like any special hobby or activities you really enjoy during your free time? This is more about you, Erin.
Okay. Well, you can see the egg cartons in the background. Everyone at work brings me egg cartons because I have so many chickens. So I have a lot of chickens. And so I always run outside and grab eggs and I bring them into work for everyone. And, I think it's important when you're in this type of an industry, which is some days it's very high pressure. So I just like to do things like that that help me de-stress. I love to cook. I love to make jam. I bake a lot of homemade bread. I have my chickens, hang out with my chickens. But definitely those are the kind of things that help me relax and de-stress because some days it is tough, and so I really just like to be at home and chill out. I love to read. I read a lot about fraud. So even in my downtime, trying to stay on top of what's going on. And yeah, just hanging out with my family. That's really just very simple.
That's
And
awesome. I love that.
shopping.
Oh, and shopping. That's awesome. I love hearing that about you. So who are your top three chicken buddies that help de-stress you? Do they have names?
Um, they do have names. So we have twin roosters who I love, and they're Frick and Frack. Or you can call them Hans and Franz. My husband gave them a different name. We honestly call them two different things, which is very weird and probably confusing for the roosters. And then we have another hen that we named Phyllis Diller because it looks like she has a little wig on her head. She's so cute and she's so sweet. And so, yeah, those are probably my three favorites, but I do love them all. They're cute.
Aw, that's so cute. I love that. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the Fraud Fighters Alliance community?
I would just say network, network, network. I cannot emphasize that enough. I have met so many people in this industry who have helped me immensely, whether it was in my career, whether it was understanding a certain type of fraud that was incredibly confusing to me, whether it's just someone to bounce ideas off of. You can never have enough colleagues in this industry, and it just makes us all stronger. So those would be my, I guess, parting words.
Awesome. A huge thank you, Erin, for sharing your invaluable expertise and perspectives with us today. Your insights have been incredibly enlightening and inspiring. And that wraps up our insightful conversation with Erin Lewis, Head of Risk Management at People's Credit Union. To our audience, we hope you found this interview as enriching as we did. Stay tuned for more engaging discussions and interviews as we continue our journey together in the fight against fraud. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and keep fighting the good fight. Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, Rose.